If your computer starts glitching or it gets completely overwhelmed by too much data, you download a patch.
Right, yeah. You update the operating system, you reboot it, and boom, it's functioning perfectly again.
Exactly. It's external. It's this purely mechanical, very clean fix.
It really is a passive process for the machine. I mean, you just overwrite the old code and you move on.
But then look at the human mind. Think about how you have to adapt to a highly stressful day at work.
Yeah.
Or how you try to learn a completely alien skill, or even how you process the unspoken rules of the society you live in.
Because there is no external download for you.
Right. Your machinery has to physically rewire itself from the inside out while the engine is literally still running.
It is the ultimate real-time operating system update.
Yeah.
We're constantly rewriting our own neural pathways based on, well, what we encounter, how we communicate, and the cultural waters we swim in.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a biological miracle that we don't crash more often.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today we are really opening the hood on the human operating system.
We really are.
We have this massive, multifaceted stack of research, historical data, and psychological analysis today. And our mission in this deep dive is to connect the dots across fields that might seem totally unrelated at first glance.
Very unrelated on the surface, yeah.
Right. I mean, we're going from the microscopic neurochemistry of kindness and emotional resilience to the cognitive hacks of language learning.
Which is fascinating on its own.
Oh, totally. And from there, straight into the historical DNA of American culture. And finally, the psychology behind why we are all so obsessed with celebrity scandals.
It is essentially a masterclass in how you engage with the world.
It is an incredible journey. And while these subjects might seem incredibly diverse, they all fundamentally answer the exact same question.
Right, which is how do humans adapt, communicate, and form functioning societies?
Exactly. But to understand how you interact with society at large, we first have to look inward, right, in your brain's internal ecosystem.
The inner world. Because before you can conquer a new language or navigate cultural norms, you absolutely have to have the internal hardware running properly.
Right.
And the research points to emotional resilience as the foundational bedrock of all of this.
Okay, but I want to push back on this a little, because psychologists talk a lot about optimism being the key to resilience.
They do, yes.
And, I mean, is that just toxic positivity? You know, burying your head in the sand while your house is literally on fire, sitting there saying, well, this is fine.
That is a crucial distinction to make, and honestly, it is a trap a lot of people fall into. But no, it is absolutely not toxic positivity.
Okay.
True resilience requires what psychologists call clear-eyed optimism.
Clear-eyed optimism. What does that actually look like?
It means you absolutely see the storm clouds gathering. You acknowledge the fire in the house. You aren't avoiding the hardship or pretending the rain isn't wet, you know?
Right, you're not delusional.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The optimism comes from an unwavering trust in your own internal ability to weather that storm. Ah, okay. So it's not the world is perfect. It's the world is messy, but I have the tools to handle it.
Precisely. And what's amazing is how facing those fears head on physically changes your brain's structure.
Like literally changing the wiring.
Yes. When you confront a fear rather than avoiding it, you are actively rewriting your amygdala's threat response.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, elite special forces actually use specific reframing phrases in the middle of terrifying situations.
Wait, really? Like what?
When the stress hits, they literally tell themselves, this is a test and I'm going to use it to grow.
That's intense.
It is, but it forces the brain out of a panic loop.
But it makes sense mechanistically, I guess. The data also highlights that physical exercise plays a huge role in this too, acting as a literal stress vaccine.
It does.
So basically, exercise is like a boot camp for your emotional immune system.
That is a perfect analogy. Because you're intentionally putting your cardiovascular system under physical stress, right? So that when the emotional stress hits later, like, I don't know, a bad breakup or a terrible performance review, your nervous system is already used to adapting.
Exactly. It doesn't redline because it's been in the red before and it knows it can survive.
You're priming the biological pump.
Yes, but having a resilient inner world isn't just about facing down trauma or hitting the gym. It is deeply tied to how we treat each other, too.
Which brings us to kindness.
Right. Kindness, according to neuroscientists, isn't just this warm and fuzzy moral concept. It is a profound, measurable neurochemical event.
This part completely blew my mind. I always thought of kindness as like a philosophical choice.
Yeah,
you know?
lots of people.
But basically, holding the door for someone is a contagious neurochemical workout. When you perform an act of kindness, or even just witness one, your brain releases oxytocin, the love hormone, and serotonin.
And we should probably clarify what those chemicals are actually doing in the body.
Good idea.
So oxytocin promotes social bonding and trust. It actually lowers your blood pressure.
Wow.
And serotonin regulates your mood and gives you a deep sense of satisfaction and well-being. So when you help someone, you are literally drugging yourself with natural stabilizers.
That is amazing, and it doesn't stop with you either. The research says witnessing kindness triggers a neurological response called moral elevation.
Yes. Moral elevation. And this makes you want to replicate that behavior.
Right.
It creates a literal, measurable ripple effect in society. If you see someone, say, pay for the coffee of the person behind them in line, your brain receives a secondary hit of oxytocin.
Even if you're just watching it happen.
Exactly. And that drastically increases the statistical likelihood that you will do something kind later that day.
It's basically contagious.
It really is. And the reason all of this inner rewiring matters, the resilience, the exercise, the kindness, is that it builds cognitive flexibility.
Cognitive flexibility.
Right. Having a resilient brain gives you a massive toolkit of coping mechanisms. Sometimes you need to grit your teeth, sure, but other times you need to use humor to diffuse tension. A flexible brain just doesn't rely on a one-size-fits-all reaction.
Which means if your brain is that malleable, if it can adapt to emotional stressors and neurochemicals, that easily you can actively hijack that adaptability to master complex skills.
Absolutely.
Like, say, hacking your own neural pathways to learn a new language and completely changing your internal monologue.
If you can rewire your brain for resilience, you can certainly rewire it for fluency. Linguists have dived deep into the mechanics of this.
Right, specifically looking at the holy grail of language learning, thinking in English, or whatever your target language happens to be.
Yes, because to really master a language, you have to remove the mental hurdle of translating everything back and forth in your head.
It just takes too much processing power, right?
Exactly. It creates a lag. The
Yeah.
experts suggest you have to start ridiculously small to forge those direct neural pathways.
Like narrating things.
Yes. You literally just start narrating your everyday life. You walk into the kitchen and think, the coffee is hot.
It seems overly simplistic, honestly.
It does, but what you are doing is creating direct biological connections between a sensory concept, like the heat of the mug in your hand, and the new vocabulary.
Bypassing your native language's translation center entirely.
Precisely. But the most powerful tool for this cognitive hijacking is something linguists call the shadowing technique.
Okay, yes, I loved this part. Vocal mimicry. You're listening to a native speaker and echoing them a split second later.
They call it lagged shadowing.
To me, this sounds like trying to learn how to dance by standing directly on top of your partner's feet while they move. You know,
That's a funny way to put it, but yeah.
you're forcing your mouth and your brain to follow a rhythm they just don't naturally know.
What's fascinating here is that the physical act of speaking forces the brain to internalize the data completely differently than just passive listening.
Because you're actually moving the muscles?
Exactly. But the advanced shadowing techniques, this is where the real cognitive leaps happen.
Advanced shadowing, what does that involve?
Well, advanced shadowing means doing it without the safety net of a transcript. You incorporate physical movement while you speak, and you literally layer in the speaker's original emotion.
Okay, hold on. I have to ask about the reality of doing this.
Sure.
If I'm pacing around my living room, using the shadowing with emotion, right, and I'm aggressively narrating my fluffy cat without a transcript, won't I just look completely unhinged?
Oh, you might look entirely unhinged to someone looking through your window, yes.
Okay, glad we established that.
But the neurological payoff is massive.
Yeah.
When you shadow with emotion and movement, it isn't just about getting the pronunciation right. It is about internalizing the rhythm, the cadence, and the cultural context of the speaker.
You're absorbing their vibe, basically.
You are essentially taking on their persona.
Yeah.
And when you adopt a persona, it lowers what linguists call your affective filter.
Affective filter, what is that?
It means you stop being so self-conscious about making mistakes because you are pretending to be someone else. It forces your brain to process the language dynamically, the exact way a native speaker does.
Wow. So you're basically becoming a vocal clone?
In a way, yes.
And it's not just the words, right? The research says it's the space between the words, too.
Pancake.
Communication experts emphasize the power of nonverbal cues in all of this.
They are critical.
Things like adopting power poses to trick your own brain's endocrine system into feeling confident before you speak.
Correct.
Or utilizing the incredible power of strategic pauses.
Yes, and being hyper aware of what communication coaches call the 7 deadly sins of speaking.
Right.
Which includes habits like gossiping, judging, or being chronically negative.
Wait. How does avoiding gossip help you learn a language? That seems like a stretch.
Think about the actual mechanics of gossip or constant negativity. It relies on a very specific, usually limited set of vocabulary and a repetitive, cynical, emotional tone.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
When you shadow a great persuasive speaker, you aren't just learning their vocabulary, you are absorbing their avoidance of those conversational sins.
Oh, wow.
If you force yourself not to complain, your brain has to scramble to find new, constructive vocabulary to fill the silence. You are literally absorbing their physical presence and their elevated linguistic framework.
That is wild. Your brain is scrambling for new words because you banned the easy negative ones.
Exactly.
But here is the catch. When you adopt a native speaker's rhythm perfectly, you inevitably absorb the cultural programming that created that rhythm in the first place.
You can't separate the two.
Language is deeply intertwined with cultural DNA, which drops us right into the complexities of navigating American society and its ideals.
It does.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because American directness is famous worldwide.
Oh, absolutely.
But I have to challenge this. Is this famous directness really a deeply ingrained cultural trait? Or is it just, a convenient, culturally sanctioned excuse to be blunt and rude?
It is actually heavily rooted in the cultural DNA. And to understand it, you really have to look at the historical blueprints.
Okay, take us back.
The Puritan colonial era laid a very strict groundwork for values like hard work, moral austerity, and extreme self-reliance.
Wait, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Because the Puritans were intensely religious, right? And hyper-focused on their tight-knit communities.
Yes, very communal.
If someone stepped out of line, the whole village punished them. So how does that communal mindset breed modern, cutthroat American individualism?
That is a great catch. The Puritans were communal in practice, but their theology rested entirely on individual salvation and personal responsibility before God.
Ah, individual salvation.
Right. They established the foundational work ethic, this idea that your personal labor reflects your moral worth. Decades later, figures like Thomas Jefferson basically secularized that exact idea.
Okay, so keeping the work ethic but dropping the religion.
Exactly. He stripped away the religious strictures but kept the intense focus on individual liberty. That philosophical shift is what fueled the frontier spirit of westward expansion.
Ah, the pioneers.
Precisely. When you are a pioneer building a community from scratch in a harsh, totally unforgiving environment, efficiency is a literal matter of survival.
You don't have time to beat around the bush.
Right. If you are building a cabin before winter sets in, you do not have time for elaborate social pleasantries or indirect, high-context communication.
You just need someone to hand you the hammer.
Exactly. That directness was born from physical necessity. And over generations, it became culturally coded as honesty and efficiency rather than rudeness.
That makes perfect sense. The environment shapes the language, which then shapes the brain.
It's a continuous loop.
But historians also highlight a massive core tension at the heart of all this.
They do.
There's this constant vibrating push and pull in America between that fierce pioneer individualism and the collective democratic ideal of equality.
It is the defining friction of American culture, without a doubt. The American spirit is characterized by optimism, resilience, and a profound can-do attitude.
Which ties back to what we were talking about earlier with resilience.
Exactly. But balancing the right of the individual to fiercely forge their own path while simultaneously demanding a society where everyone has an equal shot at the starting line.
Yeah.
Well, it is a perpetual, messy balancing act. And you see the spirit reflected everywhere, especially in the education system.
How so?
Unlike many global systems that prioritize rote memorization and conformity, the American system historically prioritizes critical thinking, questioning authority, and individual adaptability.
You definitely see it in everyday modern norms, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the arm's length rule for personal space.
Right.
If you get on a subway and someone stands 3 inches from you in their empty seats, your brain literally screams that a boundary has been violated.
It triggers a real stress response.
That invisible bubble is the physical manifestation of individualism. Or look at the necessity of tipping.
That's a great example.
It's essentially a built-in, individualized wage system for the service industry. Your hustle dictates your reward.
It's the pioneer spirit applied to a restaurant.
Exactly. And you even see this history in the food. Culinary anthropologists call the American food landscape a time capsule of immigrant influences. It's a literal melting pot of people forging their own individual paths in a new collective.
It is a dynamic, constantly evolving culture built on the idea of ultimate success and upward mobility.
American dream.
Right. The American dream is the pursuit of that peak, powered by that same clear-eyed optimism we talked about earlier.
Which brings us to the shadow side of the American dream.
Yeah, it gets a bit darker here.
If your entire cultural blueprint is about the glorious climb to the top of the mountain, what happens when the people at the very peak fall off?
That's a long way down.
Exactly. And that leads us straight into our intense psychological obsession with celebrity scandals.
It really is the dark side of that exact same coin. If a society idolizes the individual success story, the failure of the individual inherently becomes a massive public spectacle.
Right.
And while the 24-hour news cycle feels very modern to us, celebrity itself isn't new.
No, not at all.
Historical records remind us that ancient Roman gladiators and Renaissance artists like Leonardo da Vinci, for example, were the absolute superstars of their day.
They had intense drama, public rivalries, and massive public scrutiny.
Exactly.
So the paparazzi vibe has literally always been there, just without the camera.
Pretty much, yeah.
But the psychology behind why we care so much is what's really wild to me. Psychologists point to two main drivers, social comparison and schadenfreude. Let's break that down, because schadenfreude is getting pleasure from someone else's misfortune.
Yes.
But why? Like, why do we get a literal neurochemical hit of pleasure when someone who seems absolutely perfect messes up?
It comes back to social comparison and evolutionary psychology. In a tribe, your status dictates your survival. When we see a celebrity who has massive wealth, perfect looks, and endless resources, they represent the absolute top of the hierarchy.
Right, they're the apex.
Exactly. When they fail, it artificially lowers the benchmark for our own survival and status.
Oh, wow.
It neurochemically soothes our own insecurities. It makes our own messy, imperfect lives feel just a little more acceptable.
So what does this all mean? Are we just consuming these scandals as trashy, guilty pleasure entertainment, or are celebrities basically functioning as modern-day crash test dummies for our societal morals?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, they absolutely function as modern morality plays. We use the downfalls of these massive public figures as a canvas to explore and debate our own values.
Like testing our own ethics on them.
Yes. Society needs a hero to project its aspirations onto, and crucially, it needs a villain to process right and wrong.
That makes a lot of sense.
When a celebrity falls, they shift from hero to cautionary tale. It allows the public to debate ethics, fidelity, or honesty from a safe distance without having to actually examine their own flaws too closely.
And social media has just poured absolute gasoline on this fire.
Oh, without a doubt.
It creates this wild, unprecedented illusion of intimacy. You know, you're looking at a pop star's breakfast on Instagram, you're seeing them in their sweatpants in their living room.
Right.
So your brain is actively tricked into feeling like you're in their inner circle.
The brain doesn't always distinguish between digital proximity and real friendship.
Exactly. And when a scandal breaks, it shatters that carefully controlled narrative. It doesn't just feel like news, it feels like a personal betrayal to the audience.
Which is why we really have to approach this entire ecosystem with extreme caution. This whole dynamic raises an incredibly important question about media literacy.
Yeah, how we consume it all.
Right. The media, especially the tabloid ecosystem, presents a highly distorted reality. They are literally selling a narrative of a downfall for profit.
It's a business.
A huge one. And as consumers of this information, we have to remember the human cost. These are real people, often experiencing the worst moments of their lives on a global stage. We must consume these stories with empathy and critical thinking, not just blind schadenfreude.
It's all connected, isn't it? We've taken quite a journey today.
We really have.
I mean, we started by looking at the microscopic neurochemistry of a single-kind act and how facing fears acts as a mental gym for emotional resilience.
Right.
Then we took that highly adaptable brain and saw how you could use vocal cloning hacks, literally shadowing native speakers, to bypass your translation center, master a new language, and completely change your internal monologue.
And from there, we traced how that language is infused with the pioneer roots of American directness, a culture defined by the endless tension between fierce individualism and equality.
And finally, we ended up in the grand gladiatorial arena of modern celebrity gossip, where we use the downfalls of the ultra-successful to neurochemically soothe our own insecurities and define our collective morals.
For you, the learner listening to this is your blueprint.
Yeah.
Whether you are actively trying to rewire your brain to learn a new language or trying to bounce back from a stressful meeting using cognitive flexibility.
Or just mindlessly scrolling past a tabloid headline about a billionaire's divorce,
Exactly. You now have the psychological and cultural framework to understand why you and the society around you operate this way. It's not random. It is deeply fundamentally human.
It really is. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We talked a lot today about reality. We talked about how the brain adapts to real stress, how we use shadowing of real people to learn, and the powerful, albeit manipulated, illusion of intimacy with real celebrities on social media.
Right.
But as artificial intelligence and virtual reality environments become hyper-realistic,
Right.
what happens when the native speakers you are shadowing to learn a language and the celebrities you are obsessing over online aren't even real humans anymore? How will your brain and your capacity for empathy adapt when the drama, the connection, and the downfall are entirely artificial? Good luck updating your mental operating system for that one.